Okay, a bit of, right, just give me a second. It's, what do I need here? Presenter view. And yeah, can you see my screen? Excellent, very good. So hello everyone, again, for those who joined slightly later, very happy to be here and to be giving this talk. And like Borayan, I would like to say that I'm no expert on the topic and not part of material culture really. I'm really a textual person, but variety is the spice of life. And here you go, here am I talking about the object that is, the objects that are the padukas. So I'd like to first of all begin by thanking these people who helped me so much. Without these swamis and their generals' help, this paper would not have existed at all. I pestered them constantly, some of them at least, with my questions for days and days altogether. And they bore everything very graciously. So my kritagnyata and my namaskaram to them all. And I'd like to remind that all faults, and there will be plenty, are entirely mine. And also, thank you so much for all my colleagues who have also helped me in various different ways. Okay, so moving on to the topic. The worship of the feet of a deity or of a revered person is an ancient practice, and a common one at that, spread across most regions and religions of the world. The feet, and by extension, the padukas, the sandals, and footprints that stand in lieu of them, have, of course, a symbolic value as they stand for the whole person and represent their very essence, their power even, and so forth. There has been excellent scholarship, especially recently on this topic. And I was thinking of Julia Egeval's edited volume in the footsteps of the masters. So I won't actually go into any detail here. I have plenty to say already on this topic, very restricted as it is. So this phenomenon is no different among the Śrīvaiṣṇavas. For, as the Śrīvaiṣṇava Acaryas point out, just as a suckling child has a preference for its mother's breast, even though it loves its mother as a whole, those who seek surrender favor God's feet among all his other limbs. And the feet and the padukas are therefore all pervasive. And I'll quickly show a few examples in a minute, but very quickly. One thing that I need to mention right at the beginning now is that I have gathered information from both Vadakalai and Tenkalai sources from people related, involved with the mathas, Ācārya Puruṣas, meaning the non-ascetic, learned Acaryas who can initiate, as well as the lay devotees from both Kalais. And there are differences in their practices, which initially seemed huge to me, especially between the two Kalais. But later on, I understood that similarities seem to outweigh the differences, as we shall see. So please bear with me as I try to grapple with these differences, especially since I received an influx of information, both facts and opinions, in the last 3 days. And I had to reorganize my ideas, the structure of the paper, my conclusions, as late as a couple of hours ago. But so actually, as a consequence, I'm afraid my paper will be more descriptive than analytical, but hopefully informative and interesting nonetheless. Okay, one thing is very clear from where we begin here. The Padukā Āradhanam, the worship of the Paduka, is common to all the Śrīvaiṣṇavas, all of whom, whether it's ascetic, Ācārya Puruṣas, or lay devotee, they all value their Acaryans very highly. Okay. As there isn't much time, I'm actually going to skip a couple of slides, and this is one of those slides. Actually, this was meant to show how the differences, or how the references and allusions to the Lord's feet are present everywhere in this tradition. I won't spend time showing this, but probably point out, because we just had a talk about the Shataris, I would just like to point out that the boundaries between the Shatari and the Padukas are a little vague. They are a bit overlapping. But to make things easier, at least for me, I will focus on the real padukas that are or can be worn and how they are worshipped. Again, this is a slide that I'm going to skip, and this is about the padukas rather than just the feet. Am I making sense? I don't know. Let's see if I do. Let's continue. So there are plenty of examples that I could go on and cite to show the omnipresence of the feet and the padukas of the Lord among the Śrīvaiṣṇavas. But here I'm going to focus on the padukas of the Acaryas, not the Lord. For among the Śrīvaiṣṇavas, like in other tantric traditions, the Ācāryaṉ is at least as worship worthy as God is, if not more so, as he puts the disciple in the path towards God and liberation, which is an unparalleled act of grace. So his feet are also worshipped like God's. And in order to show one's submission, to seek surrender, to receive blessings, you name it. And worshipping those feet is not just about prostrating before them or washing their feet, for example, but also consuming that water, as you can see on this picture. And that water is known as Śrīpada Tirtham, sacred foot water, considered purificatory and powerful, and something that is very important for this talk as well, because I'll keep coming back to it. Anyway, while the worship of the Ācāryaṉ's feet is in this way primordial, it is not possible, at least not for most people, to always be at the feet of those Acaryas and worship them on a daily basis. And that's where the padukas step in and represent the wearer and accept that worship on his behalf and grant whatever the Acharya would grant: grace, protection, comfort. So just as Rama's padukas represented Rama himself for Bharata, as you can see on the picture, just as Ramanuja's padukas represented Ramanuja himself to his female disciple Kungil Pirati, so do the Acharya's padukas for his disciple. By the way, there is a very nice story involving Kungil Pirati. If anybody is interested, that could make a nice story during the Q&A session. And also the padukas that you see here are said to have been worshipped by Kungil Pirati, and they are believed to belong to Ramanuja himself. And the worship of Ramanuja's feet and padukas would be a fully fledged topic in itself. So I just won't venture there, at least not today. Anyway, we shall see that the padukas are worshipped, how the padukas are worshipped in a minute, and how the water collected from bathing them, meaning the Acharya Paduka Tirtham, is also known as Śrīpada Tirtham, and how it is considered as Sarva Shreshtham, and that it has unparalleled mahatvam, just as the water gathered from the Ācāryaṉ's foot, directly, I mean. Okay, I had a video, but I think I'm just running out of time. I was just going to show you how really the padukas can represent an acharya. And actually, this is a video shot by the Paundarikapuram ashram, where the acharya's padukas are received with the Purna Kumbham Maryade. So as if a person of some importance, of greatness is received. No time here. If we have time later on, perhaps. I'll just skip here this. Oops, sorry, it still insists. Oh, let's go to the next. So here's the plan. So I'd like to, this is more, I'm just thinking through all this. When and where did the practice of revering the Ācāryaṉ's padukas stem from among the Śrīvaiṣṇavas? And from a practical point of view, how are the padukas made? Who makes them and how? And then finally, how are they worshipped? How often? I tried to reshuffle the order in which I was going to present the topics. None of them was satisfactory. So there you go, you have this. Don't ask me why. So these are some of the questions anyway that I will be trying to answer today. So I'm going to begin with the texts. I'm a textual scholar, so texts have quite an attraction for me. That's precisely why I'm going to be very quick and not get attached to them, because otherwise the material culture will turn into textual culture before you know what's happening. So I just began at the beginning. The Divya Prabandham, for example, I started looking for references for the Lord's feet. There are ample references, like everywhere. I haven't translated these bits because suffices to know that there are ample bits. I just added there are many references to the Lord's feet. As for his padukas, there are a few, not quite so many as for the feet. And if we move on to the devotees, there are a few references to the devotees' feet, but I don't think there are any on the devotees' paduka. I'm not getting into the teachers here. I don't think I saw much, but I might actually be wrong. But for the moment, this is what we have in the Divya Prabandham. And then I moved on, and I really should thank Marion here for all the references that she found for me. Padukas in the Pancharatra text. So the sandals are offered to the god during the ritual worship. Say some of the samhitas, as you can see, I've put all the references there. They are also ritually worshipped beforehand, and this is supposedly the Lord's padukas. And then some of the samhitas also mention how the padukas, with what material they are made, and how where they are placed, etc. As for the Ācārya's padukas in the very same Pancharatra text, the Tantric guru is deified, as you know. So his sandals ought to be revered according to this non-Vaiṣṇava agamic text. The agamic text, the Vaiṣṇava agama here, Sanat Kumara Samhita, says that the Ācārya gives the padukas, supposedly his own, to the disciple at initiation, supposedly, so that the disciple can worship those padukas. So we have, on the whole, it seems to me that the practice of worshipping the Ācārya's padukas roughly began, like really roughly began around the beginning of the second millennium. And then if we move on to the second millennium, the Śrīvaiṣṇava literature, like very quickly, because, yeah, well, anyway, references to the Ācārya's feet abound, for example, in the Ramanuja. It's absolutely everywhere. And the growing importance of the Ācāryaṉ, which has been thoroughly mapped by Patricia Mummy, is actually matched by the increasing importance accorded to the feet, but also to the padukas. The earliest example I found of the sacredness of the padukas is actually Nanjiya's Umpadanayanapari, which Madhusudanan Swami actually quoted in order to mention, in order to refer to the Shathari, but actually the word that is used is Śrīvaiṣṇava Nidhiyana. So I initially thought that they might be a reference to the padukas rather than the Shathari, because the very first commentary by Pirlan mentions Sri Shatakopan. So that is very clear, it's the Shathari, whereas here it was the Tiruvadi Nilegar. But of course, the Shathari also can be called the Tiruvadi Nilegar. So it's a bit ambiguous. So I'll skip that bit. I won't get into that. The very a very clear description of the worship of the Ācārya's padukas, known here as the Sri Padaraksha here, is found in the Ārayarapadi Guru Parampara Prabhavam. I think there might be other texts. I'm still looking for them, actually. If you know any of them, please let me know, whether it's Pancharatra text or these texts. I'll be very happy to get all those ideas. So this hagiographic text gives a fully fledged account of worship of a worship by Kungil Pirati again, whom we already met, of Ramanuja's Padukas. And similarly, another hagiographic book, it's like a compilation of stories and tidbits actually. The Vartamale also mentions the Tiruvadi Nilayarvakar. It mentions the same story, but also it calls the Rama's Padukas as Tiruvadi Nilayarvakar, where the word arvar is affixed to this, which shows that the padukas are divine, and in another way, they are also personified. I think it's very beautiful. So I thought I must show this to you. So I think also around the same time, there are more and more references to the chief disciples or devotees being referred as their teacher's feet. I think Madhusudanan Swami already mentioned that in his talk. So thankfully, I won't have to go into that right now. So I think more or less I have shown that throughout the second millennium, the importance of the Ācārya's padukas grow by leaps and bounds, as I see from here. So let's now move on from the text towards matter now and flash forward to our times. So what are the padukas made of, by whom and how? So let's move to this. So generally the padukas that were worn or that are still worn are made of wood. And I learned that the most common wood that is used for making these is the nuna tree wood, which is the Indian mulberry, because it is very lightweight. So it is easier to walk in those padukas. And this wood actually is used solely for making yokes and plows so that the bulls can pull them with ease as well. And I also know for a fact that these trees grow easily and absolutely everywhere in this region. So it's not very expensive either. And apparently there are other options as well, perhaps less desirable. For example, the wood of the jack tree, but also teak wood and the coromandel ebony. But all these apparently tend to be heavier than the nuna tree wood. So they are harder to walk in. And some people apparently think that the country fig, which is the atti, with which attivaradar is made, that's the next talk, so I'm not going to say more on this. Apparently, some people think this is a very good choice. But also, apparently, I haven't checked the scriptures. The scriptures apparently forbid treading upon that wood. It's too sacred, I presume. So the nuna tree, nuna wood is actually the most preferred one. But also because all these trees that are mentioned, they don't rot very easily. Because, you know, as you will see, they will be bathed during worship. So if you want them to last, and apparently some of them actually last up to 10 generations. We're going to see how the situation is in the Ahobila Matam. They have the padukas that have lasted for centuries, actually. So you want them to actually last for a long time. Now, very quickly, as time is ticking, technically, as Srinivasa Rajan Swami said yesterday, for the symbols, etc., Śrīvaiṣṇava carpenters are preferred as a rule, but nowadays they are very hard to find. So any traditional carpenter will do. So the padukas are sourced from wherever they can be sourced from, which means that the carpenters do not have any special anushtanas while making these, no food restrictions, recitation of mantras, etc. But once the padukas reach the matha, I mean, I'm speaking about the Ahobila Matam because that's where my source of information comes from in this case. The matha is where they are distributed to the devotees in the case of the Ahobila Matha. They are purified with the performance of a punyaha vachanam, a purifying rite with mantras, as its name suggests. And in some other places, the devotees apparently bring their own padukas that they got from some place and get them blessed by their Ācāryaṉ for various reasons. Okay, padukas of other material also exist. For example, this miniature version in silver or imprints made on silk cloth with turmeric kumkuma and water or perfumed water, or else red ochre powder are also used. They are apparently the equivalent of the padukas. Now, the Tenkale seem to pour a little water during worship. We'll see more about that, the question of bathing these padukas. Well, the Vadakala, at least the person that I spoke to, said that no aradhanam is to be performed for the imprints on the silk cloth. I mean, I think there are different opinions and there is no one right way of doing these things. And whatever he pointed out that one should recite the Ācāryaṉ, place these cloths on the head and then fold them and then place them back. So on the other hand, the padukas can be worshipped more or less elaborately, as we shall see now. So let me begin by showing you how the padukas are worshipped by at least, in one matha, the Ahobila Matha, which was founded in roughly, I think, the 15th century. The first thing I think before we move on to remember is that Perumal, meaning Narayana, his aradhanam is to be done first. The tirtham, Perumal tirtham is to be consumed first, and then the Paduka aradhanam is done next. So in this case, what we have here is, okay, it's not entirely complete here. Well, if you're like here, I've forgotten to put the photo of the main deity of the matha, which is Malol and Lakshmi Narasimha, and all the salagramas, the fossils, as you know, are worshipped first, and then the attention is turned towards the padukas. And this kind of worship is performed on Dwadashi day in this matha, but more on that in a minute. Here, as you can see, all 45 pairs of the past years from the matam, known as the Aragya singers, are placed, beginning with the founder Ādivañśava, roughly 15th century. Please note that here the padukas are all silver clad. They were done very recently to stop the wood from rotting due to the passage of time and usage, and to preserve them for the future generations. Okay, so here I have a video. I'll just summarize very quickly what's happening, and then I'll play the video, but not continuously. We'll just skip, no time for that. So at the beginning of the Aradhanam, you will see a screen is drawn. And I think that at the preliminary stage, at least, there is a pranayama is performed by the Ācāryaṉ here, anga and karanyasa as well, and apparently mantras are recited that are only known by the Ācāryaṉ. And it is followed by the bathing of the padukas, offering of gandha, in this case sandalwood paste, alankara, in this case flowers, and then the three upacharas, dhupa, smoke, naivedya, that's not, oh yeah, is it? I'm probably messing up in this order. Anyway, but naivedya is offered, but also the light, the arati flame. And then you will see that the Ācāryaṉ circumambulates at the end. So let me play this. I hope the volume is not too high. I hope that for you. Okay. So the purification begins, and then the bathing.
And you need to share the computer audio.
I haven't done that. Oh dear, how do I do that? How do I ever do that? You can't hear that, can you? You can't?
Under share screen, there's some more features, Sugandhi.
Well, normally it shouldn't bother me this. Okay, let me stop sharing and then share screen. But if okay, let's see, share sound. I only have share sound, and again, optimized for the video clip. Sorry about that. Let's see. Okay. Okay, let's see. Right. Okay, so far you didn't hear anything. So that's one thing, because you can't hear those mantras. So good thing for you. Can you hear now? Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so bathing, more bathing. And you can notice that they are high heels here. More and then sandalwood paste. Sandalwood paste, flowers, more flowers, more flowers, more flowers, more flowers, dhupa, Deepa, and Deepa will come back again. Okay, naivedya, just fruit. And then more Deepa. And then he goes round, he circumambulates. Okay. So there you go. So after the Aradhana, I really have to rush here now. The Ācāryaṉ offers the water collected from the bathing of all these padukas here, as you can see. And this, as I said, is known as the Śrīvaiṣṇavas Tirtham, which is then distributed among the devotees. So which brings the blessings of all the Ācāryaṇ's past. And it is, as I said, believed to be purifying and very powerful in more ways than one. And once again, I'd like to point out that there's a reminder that this Śrīvaiṣṇavas Tirtham should only be taken after the Perumal Tirtham is taken. And there are different ways in which they are taken. I won't go into the details here, no time. If you're interested, we can come back here. And this question is very important though. How about this worship? Is it done every day or once in a while? That's perhaps where lies the biggest difference that I found, especially among the Vadakalais and the Tinkalais. And it's not a very strict one or a huge one either. Let's see. It's related to how often the Paduka Aradhanam is performed and how often the Śrīvaiṣṇavas Tirtham is consumed. So from what I understand, the Tenkalais are supposed to do this Aradhanam every day, as it purifies the disciples, etc. Among the Vadakalais, the rule is that the Purvacharya Śrīpada should not be taken every day and should not be taken for no reason. So the worship is undertaken either as a prayashchitta, atonement. For example, if you eat outside, you travel to some place, faraway place, you come back and you take this for shuddhi, for purification, or it is performed on special days like the Tirunakshatram, the birthday of the Acharya, or it is performed on Dvadashi, which is a special day, because it's a very special thing to break your fast from Ekadashi with the Śrīpada Tirtham. But again, it's not a rule that is completely common to all the Vadakalais, because as was pointed out a minute ago, in the Andavan ashram, as their website indicates, this Paduka Aradhanam is done every day. When I asked why, I got all sorts of answers. They said that's because for them, the Paduka Aradhanam is more important. For us at the Ahobila Matham, the Aradhanam of Pirimal is more important. And somebody else said, that's not true. Paduka Aradhanam is important for everybody. Anyway, so I asked the questions and I got a few answers. So this is, I think we got the fundamental difference sorted here. If I move on, I also asked an Acharya Purushan, in this case, a Vadakalai person, how he performs the rites. So the rites seem to be very similar, perhaps a little less elaborate. He says, only a few flowers are to be offered, a couple of pieces of fruit perhaps, and then given away to children as prasada. Again, other families might do things very differently, but this person, this is what he said to me. And then at the end of the worship, the padukas can be placed on the head like a shathari, and the Paduka Tirtham is given to everybody. And then he says the padukas are then wrapped up in a piece of cloth and stored until the next time that they are worshipped. So perhaps the major variation between the disciples from a matha and the Acharya Purushas is that the Acharya Purushas sometimes tend to have more than one Acharya Parampara. In the mathas, they have this Mathadhipati, the Ācāryaṉ and his previous Ācāryaṉ, etc. But these people can have more than one. For example, for they could have a Samashrayana Parampara. So the Ācāryaṉ who performs initiation often with the Acharya Purushas is the eldest male in their own family. For the Vadakalais, which when it's done separately, they have a Bharanyasa Parampara, and also they have a Kalakshepa Parampara. So the Acharya who teaches not just any random text or initiates any random mantra, but those who teach the Grantha Chatushtayam and apparently the Anhikam. So their padukas can also be placed and worshipped for the Acharya Purushans. And Naresh here also pointed out that in his family, they kept and worshipped padukas of visiting Acharyans as well. So although the person I interviewed said that there's absolutely no need to worship or consume the Śrīpada Tirtham of another Acharya or padukas, anyway, there are slight differences of opinions anyway. So I also found this very nice ebook for the disciples of the Andavan Ashramam who may not have been very well trained to perform this kind of worship in these modern times. I'll skip this because there's just no time. As you can see, this is getting ready for the performance of the Aradhana. And then you have very similar items, as you can see, reciting the Ācāryaṇ, which is a self-contained verse in praise of the Acharya, invoking his blessings. And then you have all these, everything like the 3 upacharams, naivedya, etc. And they also say the same thing: do not consume directly, just place it on your head first and then your mouth, etc. And of course, this is also something very important. I think we discussed a bit yesterday. The padukas are special in the sense that you don't use Perumal's garland, etc., or the offerings done to Perumal for the padukas. They have to be exclusive for the paduka worship. I was also okay, Tulasi should not be offered, fine, because Tulasi is Vishnu's wife. And Naivedyam is apparently not cooked food, at least not in this ashrama. And then another thing is that apparently padukas, even in the richest families, they use wooden plates and wooden utensils when dealing with the aradhana of the padukas, because they can't be used for anything else at all. So you can't use silver. If you use silver, then you can't use it for Perumal even. So there's some kind of exclusivity linked with the Aradhana of the padukas. Again, if things are done elsewhere in a different family, well, you know, I can't know, unfortunately, everything. So here are my conclusions. We can see that the worship of the padukas is very common among all the Śrīvaiṣṇavas and has been established as part of their worship. There are clearly a few differences in the procedure and in the frequency in the way this worship is conducted, but nothing to write home about, frankly. And I think also that it would be too simplistic and superficial to attribute the difference solely to the Kale differences, as the practices of the different families may have evolved organically over the passage of time, over many centuries. And while there are other traditions in which the initiating teachers, padukas, are worshipped with reverence, like the Lingayats, which Tiziana Lorenzetti has written about very recently, no doubt there are very striking similarities, like the reverence for the teacher and by extension for their padukas, the offering of oblations to them and bathing of the padukas. They may even have evolved from a common pool of thoughts and practices, but there are also, I think, fundamental differences between their outlook and the Śrīvaiṣṇavas, let alone the method of worship. For example, the Lingayats worship God only in the form of a linga, or at least that's how they were supposed to do. And the linga, which they absolutely equated with the wandering teachers, the Jangamas, and their initiating gurus, apparently. Whereas for the Śrīvaiṣṇavas, we saw that Perumal and the Ācāryaṉ's padukas clearly they are different. Perumal is worshipped first, the Padukā is worshipped afterwards. And there's also a niyama that the Perumal's murti or the Salagrama murtis are to be placed above the level of the padukas. So there is no equality. They are both of them very sacred, worship worthy, but they are not the same, one and the same thing. And also for some, we saw that the intake of the tirtham, you know, the Perumal's tirtham comes first, the padukas tirtham comes next. And okay, anyway. And also we saw that for some at least, worshipping Perumal is done every day, whereas the padukas is done, it's a fortnightly business. Anyway, which perhaps hints that maybe there's a certain tension between the two forms of worship, seeing how some of my interlocutors like really insisted on drawing the differences between the Aradhanam of Perumal and the Aradhanam of the padukas, while agreeing unanimously upon the greatness of the Ācārya's padukas. Since they represent the Ācāryaṉ, the padukas, I mean, without whose grace it would be well nigh impossible to reach the feet of the Lord. It's almost like a buy one, get one offer. You show deep devotion for the Ācāryaṉ and their feet and their padukas, and as a bonus, you will get the Lord's feet and padukas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suganya. That was wonderful. We have